Welcome to part 4 of building RC model aircraft using the sectioned foam fuselage technique and hot wire cut wing cores. This section of the build series is going to continue now using SketchUp as the CAD to illustrate it. Use whatever CAD you're comfortable with, because all of the techniques that we're going to talk about are doable in any CAD package out there. So now we're going to start doing the formers. We have to outline the formers, sketch them out to make the proper templates. We'll also talk about how to scale them, make sure that they're the right size and everything else. Okay, so to keep this intro short, let's stop talking and start drawing. Okay, here we are in the SketchUp workspace, and we're looking at the plan that we imported and resized. So we have our plan at the correct size. However, if you come in here and look, there's always something that you need to check on, and that is to make sure that your plan is rotated correctly. So to check that rotation, it's very simple. We're going to come down here because we're going to need these construction lines anyway later on. And we're just going to simply take the center line of the fuselage here, and we're going to come back on the red axis. Notice I'm not worried about what the center line of the aircraft is doing right now. I'm merely interested in what the axis is doing on the entire plan here. We want to make sure, because according to SketchUp, that is level. And now let's look in here and see what happens. If we look, we can see that there's a distance here of about 4.5 millimeters. The plan is rotated somewhat to the right. So we need to make this level. And in order to do that, we select the entire plan again, and you can see the selection indicator here turns blue, and you can tell what's going on. Then we're going to come in here and select the rotate tool, and we'll just use the endpoint of that line as good a place as any. And we're going to come back here, select the other endpoint of that line. And now what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the plan. We saw that the plan was selected, not the line. And now we'll rotate that until we get the center line aligned with that initial line that we drew. Now we have rotated the entire drawing here, and you can even come down here and see how we've lifted this up off of the red axis. But now our drawing now is rotated, and it's square to the plane that we're going to be drawing on. Okay, now that we're aligned and square, what we're going to do is put some reference lines on the model. And these model reference lines are key. We're going to be using them throughout in order to make sure that we've got measurements correct, we've got spacings correct, and everything else. What I'm going to do now is go back to this line that we drew earlier, and you can see that it's on the center line here of the model now. I'm going to select that line, which is just a drawing line, as if you were drawing something on there, but I'm going to convert that now to a construction line. Click it, make it turn blue, and come down here when you right click, and now it's a construction line. We can use this to reference a whole lot of things when we're drawing on our model. We're going to come up here also, and we're going to create a datum line. And this datum line is very important, and we're going to again get on the thrust line of the model. We're going to take that back on the red axis. We're not paying any attention to what's drawn on the model now, other than that initial click on the thrust line. Okay, now we have another line, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to come in here, we're going to click on the line, it turns blue, then we're going to right click, come down here, convert to construction line. Now we've got two construction lines in here that are going to be used as reference lines throughout the creation of all of the rest of the models, formers, and everything else. Now there's one other reference line that we're going to create right now, and that is the vertical line back here at the very last former. Now in the model it's called F9. We're going to have different numbers on our formers, but this is the final former in the fuselage, and it's also going to be used as a reference for us. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to put up the line tool. L for line, we're going to come here right on the face of F9. We're going to click and we're going to drop that down so that it spans both the top and side views. And once again, click on the line, right click, convert to construction line. Okay, now we've got the line from which we are going to measure each and every one of our foam segments, which brings me to the next step, which is one that you will not have to do. But because I'm illustrating this build in both EPS, the white expanded foam, and XPS, the extruded foam, because I'm using both of these, we're using different foam thicknesses. So to make it easy on me, instead of having to do it all on this plan and then do it again, erase all that, do it again, I'm just going to make a copy of this. All I do is select the whole thing. Now this selection, rather than just clicking on the background, if you select the whole thing, you'll also select all of our datum lines that we've drawn on here, our construction lines. Now I'm going to be using a tool that you're probably going to be using a lot, and that is the Move tool along with Copy. M on the keyboard is Move, or you can come over here and select it from your tool layout, but M is a simple shortcut for Move. And then Control C, because we're going to copy this. So take any sort of a reference, mark on there, and then we're just going to copy it. Where we put it is pretty much immaterial. So I'm just going to drop it over here to the side. That way I can do the spacing for the EPS foam on one and the XPS foam on the other. And that's what we'll do next. Okay, there is an overview of our two plans that we're going to use. Now recall that we said that the EPS foam thickness was 48 millimeters. So what we're going to do right now is come in and make 48 millimeter segments or slices through the fuselage side view. Now I just selected T for the tape tool, and of course, as always, the tools are also over here on the toolbar. I use shortcuts a lot just for speed. So T for tape, and come here on our very tail end Charlie former, which is F9 in the model, and we're going to click on that line that we put there as a reference, and we're going to come out 48 millimeters. Now I just typed 48 millimeters into the box down here, the length of box, and then that popped up the line at 48 millimeters. That's just much easier and more accurate than trying to stretch this out an exact amount by reading it up here on the thing. So again, click on that, pull out 48 millimeters, and you simply go down the length of the fuselage, dropping lines every 48 millimeters. Now when we come to the nose of the aircraft, we're going to take a look at where the last 48 millimeter segment falls. And you'll see that it's just a small amount in front of where the actual last fuselage former falls. Now, because this is a standoff scale model and we're not really all that into exact outlines, and if we look on here, we're only about 6 or 8 millimeters, 8 millimeters too far advanced of the last former. Well, that's not enough, and you'll never be able to tell it just looking. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this good, because we're going to have to take this last former segment here anyway, our fuselage foam segment anyway, and we're going to have a solid nose block here. Some of these back here are going to be hollowed out. However, this segment right behind the firewall is going to be solid, and we need about 20 millimeters of that to be solid. So what we're going to do now is take this front one and we're going to back it up 20 millimeters to right there. When we cut our foam segments, then we're going to have a solid one here, and then from here on back they'll be hollow for lightness. But this one is going to be solid just to give some extra strength or lend a little bit of extra strength to the firewall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing over here on the XPS version, except the spacing is going to be, of course, 40 millimeters instead of 48. So I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to watch this whole process again, and we'll talk about the nose on this one too. So here goes a speeded up moment to make things shorter. Okay, we're back, and now we see that with the 40 millimeter segments, we have fallen just behind this fuselage former. Well, because, again, we're going to need a 20 millimeter thick firewall backer here, what we're going to do is we're going to just ignore that one. We're going to take that one out, and we're going to put the next or the very first former up here where it should be, but we're going to move it a little bit forward like we did in the EPS version. So F1 is going to be right here. Then we're going to back up 20 millimeters. And by the way, this is doing an autosave. I highly recommend that you set up your CAD programs to do autosaves because it can save you a lot of grief later on. Now, as you can see, our last segments here are going to consist of a 30 or 31 millimeter foam thickness, and then our 20 millimeter F1 firewall backup section. So now we've got that done. We have both drawings now sliced up into the segments that we're going to use. The next step is to come in here to each of these formers and trace out all the formers. Then we'll place them over here on the segments. Here we are over on the EPS side of the drawings again, and we're going to come down here now and start actually tracing these formers. Now F9 down here is Tail End Charlie, so we're going to do him first, and he's also a good illustration of problems that sometimes occur with these plans. If you'll take a close look at this, you will see that there is absolutely no symmetry involved here at all. So what we're going to have to do is sort of fudge things. I don't really believe that the back part of the fuselage is as narrow as this, but we're going to just kind of use, something that looks about right. Now there's another tool that we're going to be using here, and again I'll put a link to it. It's called the Bezier curve. It's up here in one of the plug-in drop-down boxes that I've got, but that's easily found and installed, and I'll put a link down below in the description about where to find that. But this is how we're going to outline our formers, and we're going to do that half at a time so that we don't end up with something that looks like this. What we're going to do is we're going to outline half of the former, duplicate it, flip it, and stick it back together. That way we know we have the exact same shape on both sides. It might not be right, but it will be the same on both sides. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop a line down here to act as a divider, and we're going to draw from that. Now you can use arc tools, and speaking of arcs and curves and things like that, SketchUp cannot actually draw a curve. What it does is it draws a series of straight line segments, and they're so close together that they look like they're a curve. One of my friends that does this doesn't use curves at all. What he does is he takes the line tool and he'll come in here and he'll just start drawing line segments himself. So we're not going to do that. We're going to at least use SketchUp's approximate curves, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to come up here and select the Bezier curve tool. We're going to be ignoring these notches, of course. They're for balsa construction. We come up here to the point on the edge of that line where the continuation of the curve is. Then we're going to come down here where the curve more or less flattens out along in here. Now we're going to just merely pull this line up, and you can see as you pull a Bezier curve out, you can take this control handle and shape that curve just about any way that you like. So what we're going to do, if you notice, the red axis became lit up here because I'm tangent to that axis, and that's a good thing. So we'll leave that tangent and select that. And we'll use again that looks about right. We'll click there, we'll right click, done, and exit tool. Now we've got a curve. We're going to do that one more time. Select the Bezier tool, come down here, select that end point, come down and eyeball where the continuation of this curve would hit the vertical line that we established in there. Select that, and once again start pulling out the Bezier curve, and it jumped over to from point and gave us tangent on the green axis, which is great. So if you click there, right click, done, and exit tool, you'll see what's happened here. We've created a face or a plane. So this is the plane or surface that we're going to use for F9, and we've kind of used a bastardized version here, halfway between the skinny one over here and the thick one over here. But because we're working with foam, this is going to be easily manipulated so that when we shape the fuselage later, it's going to be a real piece of cake to make sure all these curves conform and flow correctly. Now that we have the last former done, all we've got to do is the same thing to all the rest. So now we'll come down here to F8. We're going to do the same thing. Drop a line down the center to use as the dividing line. And again, I'm on the green axis on the face. There we go. Got the line. Up here, use the Bezier curve. Select the very top on the edge of that line, and it doesn't really matter whether you go down one side or the other. We'll just continue over here using the left. We'll come over where it looks like it's the widest, and drop an anchor point there, and we'll pull out the Bezier curve and see what this does. Okay, we're going to get a little bit fatter back here, so we'll take it right there. Done an exit tool. Do the Bezier curve one more time. Endpoint, bottom, pull it out, drop it, done an exit tool. Got another formula. Now I'm going to speed things up so you don't have to watch all this until we get up here to the cockpit area, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. But here is a speeded up portion so that you don't have to just watch every one of these. Now we're up to the fuselage former on the model of F5, and as you can see here at the top, it starts to include the back part of the canopy. So what we're going to do is we're going to include that to, instead of leaving this off and then adding on a canopy, which you're certainly welcome to do, for those of us that are going to just cut the canopy and form it out of the foam part of the fuselage, we need that there when we make this section. So right now, take our line tool again, and in this and in all of the other formers that we're going to do, we're going to include that part right there of the canopy. So let's just put that there. We're going to pull out the Bezier tool, done an exit, and we've got a line there. Now we're going to continue with this. Now I'll speed things up again until we get to the next change. Now we're up to fuselage former F4, and as you can see, not only does it include some of the canopy, if you'll look down here, the balsa model is cut off so that it sits atop the wing, which is added on under here. Well, we're not going to do the wing saddle that way. We're going to do a much more accurate version of the wing saddle by cutting it out to a template that exactly matches our airfoil. So what we need to do is go up here and take a look and see about how far down the wing extends. So here's F4, and that's where F4 over there is cut off. Well, we're going to need some more depth there. Now the amount is not really important because we're going to be cutting that off. So as long as it's at least that depth, then we'll be fine. So if we go over here and take our tape measure tool and look at the thickness of the wing and the depth here below, say, F3, if we come down here and look, we're going to find out it's about 30 millimeters. So we're going to stick with that. We'll determine that to be 30 millimeters down. So the way we're going to do that is come over here, take our tape tool, and we're going to drop our center line as usual. And now we're going to come down that center line. In order to make it obvious here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line out here perpendicular to the bottom. So now if we take our tape line and we look down 30 millimeters, you'll see that it falls right down here. We're going to have to extend our center line a little bit to include that. So there we go. Now I can erase this. So there we are. We're going to draw this and the following F3, fuselage F3, as if they were that length and not abbreviated here for the balsa wing saddle. Okay, so let's just go in here and start drawing once more. again, I'll go to the Bezier tool and speed this up. Moving up now to F3, we're going to do the same thing, and we're also going to add that bottom section down here to it also. Moving on to the last former, I'm going to show you one more characteristic of SketchUp. I mentioned earlier that it doesn't do curves, it does line segments, and this will be a good example. I'm just going to pull an arc here instead of a Bezier curve because this is a half circle. And we'll get out here, and it takes me a while to pull that exact half circle. But when I do, I'll zoom in here and you can see that's not a true smooth circle. That is a bunch of straight line segments, as you can see, but I'm going to go up here and change the number of segments from 12 to 48. And when I do that, you'll see the curve. There we go. Now the curve smooths out. Easily done. Okay, now we have all of our formers done, and as you can see, I did some on the right, some on the left. It doesn't matter as long as you've got an accurate representation of half, because we're just going to mirror these in order to complete them. But what we've got to do next is size them. These formers, as you will see when we drag them over here and start checking the sizes, will be off. And that's just the nature of these old plans. They were just off, and they just depended on you to sand them to shape when it was balsa. But we're going to take these over here one at a time, and we'll do that on the next video and show you how to make sure that these, when pulled over here and sized along each of these segments, are sized accurately. Stay with us.
Well, guys, trying to keep these in a conversational tone rather than a zip through it at warp speed is really stretching these out kind of long. But we're going to continue anyway. For whatever you can get out of it, that's fine. Right now we're going to stop, and I'm going to do a little bit more work in CAD for the thinner foams. But after that, we'll be back and I'll show you what we're going to do after that. So stick around if you can put up with the length. Thank you for tuning in.